everyone, and Vanakkam to everybody. I am Prasanjit Rathore, co-founder of the Binding Bharat initiative. And it is indeed with great pleasure, honor, and joy that I welcome you all to our session that is Indo-Bharat Sri Lanka Bilateral SADC. In tune with our neighborhood first policy, we have chosen Sri Lanka as a partner country, a country with which we have shared 2,500 years of history since the time of Ashoka. In recent times, both nations have maintained very close ties, be in the area of maritime cooperation or in the field of security architecture. The growing economic integration and the cooperation in SAARC is worth mentioning. The Ramayana link is also a symbol of shared cultural history, and the Ram Setu in particular connects two nations, both geographically and metaphorically. And to discuss all of this, we're extremely honored to have an esteemed panel of guests with us. Let me introduce them to all of you. We are very privileged to have Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, ex-Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. Sir's contribution to the development of Sri Lanka is widely acknowledged. During Sir's time, bilateral relations between the two countries were at its peak. Sir's two historic visits in the recent years bolstered the bilateral ties. Thank you, sir, for joining us. It's a pleasure. From India, we are proud to have Shri Suresh Prabhuji. He is currently Member of Parliament and India's Sherpa to the G20. Sir held important portfolios in the Government of India, such as Railways, Commerce, and Civil Aviation. Sir is also a CA by profession. Thank you, sir, for joining us. We are very delighted. We also have with us Professor N.K. Kakkar, former President of the Delhi University Teachers Association, former Director General of the Maharaja Agrasen Institute of Management. From Sri Lanka, we are joined by Mr. George Cook, Deputy Director of the Bandaranaike Center for International Studies. We also are joined by Professor Simrat Kalhon, HOD Geography, Punjab University. Other dignitaries who are joining us are Mr. Ashok Kumar Kant, Chief of Ramayana Research Team, Sri Lanka, Dr. V.S. Negi, Associate Professor of Geography at Delhi University, Dr. Anurag Sharma, Assistant Professor at the Delhi University, Ms. Mahisha Balraj, Attorney at Law, Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, and co-founder of the #Generation. Dr. Shakti De Selva, Assistant Lecturer at the Colombo University. Now, I would like to invite our convener and founder, Mrs. Kanupriya Jaju, to throw some light on what Binding Bharat is all about. Kanupriya is a political analyst, international relations and diplomacy expert who holds a master's in the domain as well. She is a human rights and youth activist also. Over to you, Kanupriya.
Thank you, Rathore. As we join together in the post-corona physical distancing conference, a new century, a new millennium knocks on our doors. I welcome all of you in today's session and also our special guest from Sri Lanka. 70 years of our independence have gone by, and yet I have pride as well as regret. Pride because we have successfully retained our sovereignty and made our democracy stronger. And regret because the curse of poverty, unemployment, discrimination, and terrorism is not eradicated. Well, you see, in today's world, we are witnessing a constant rise in geopolitical tensions and increasing threats to sovereignty, democracy, and human rights. We feel it is important to go beyond borders, ideologically, and try to realize the idea of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. Whole world is one family, one nation, one home in its true sense. At a time when individual existence is hardly appreciated and states are getting unendingly greedy for power, we talk about winning hearts. We talk about reaching out to each other. We talk about hearing each other out. We talk of binding hearts, binding Bharat. Throughout the history, the human voice has always been a powerful weapon for change. As we approach a new millennium, future beckons us. It calls upon us, indeed demands of us, to think of the welfare of our children and the future generations yet to come. There can be no greater legacy that we leave behind than to do away with mistrust and eliminate conflict and build
Prime Minister,
peace, amity, harmony.
Prime Minister का वीडियो आ रहा है?
I'm confident that through our combined efforts, we will succeed in doing so, no matter how hard we have to work in achieving it. And ladies and gentlemen, this confidence comes with an action plan of connecting with nation states and taking a step forward in international cooperation. The very first of its kind bilateral meet is organized today by Binding Bharat team with India and Sri Lanka as participating nations. It is with great pleasure and deep sense of honor that I address you all today. Speaking in front of this, which comprises of two very great statesmen, Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe and Honorable Suresh Prabhuji, our esteemed panelists and all of the participants and friends. I'm obliged and honored, and I don't even have enough words to thank you all for being a part of the change which I and we as Binding team together dream to bring in the world. Today, the whole world is doomed by an invisible enemy. We will succeed in fighting the pandemic and overcoming it. Sarve bhavantu sikhina. Sarve santu niramaya. I hope for the good health and well-being of everyone. Please take care and maintain physical distancing. Thank you. Bahomastuti and dhanyavad. Over to you, Rathor.
Very well said, Kanupriya, and thank you very much. Now, formally beginning our program, I would request Honorable Suresh Prabhuji to welcome Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe sir and then share his views on the concerned subject. Sir.
So my dear friend and a very senior politician of this part of the world, but also recognized in many other parts as a very accomplished senior leader, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, Prasanjit, Kanupriya, and all my distinguished friends. Let me first of all thank these two young friends of mine for thinking of working on this very important theme, of bringing people together, irrespective of their nationalities, irrespective of the faith, irrespective of the beliefs, irrespective of the backgrounds, and try to work together to build a common, prosperous, better future for all of us. This itself is the most laudable idea, and only as I can see, can be born in the minds of youth like you, because they see future very clearly, and they've learned the right lessons from past, and they realize that building future together is the best thing they can do. And let me tell you that you will be leaving behind a very lasting legacy for all future generations to follow, and that would be a big building block that you'll be doing. So let me congratulate you for this. With this overall objective, you couldn't have chosen for your first such endeavor a country, two countries who can work together is India and Sri Lanka. Very obvious reasons. We share not just maritime borders, but we share common culture, common civilization. In fact, there is so much of similarity between these two great countries that sometimes you wonder to find out what are the differences between these two countries. Sri Lanka and India are two close friends, great neighbors, but have a huge potential to work together in taking these civilizational values to new levels. Because not many countries in the world have such rich civilization. They may be very successful economically. They may have certain high-level records in science, technology, education. But what they can never get again, irrespective of this development, is past history. Because that's something you cannot get and change. You can change the future for sure, but your economic might cannot change your past. That's the reality. And we are two such great countries who have got a fantastic past. And therefore, how can we shape our common future together is an important opportunity. Wherever I go to Sri Lanka, and that's one of the most favorite countries. In fact, last time recently when I was there, when Mr. Vikram Singh was Prime Minister of the country, and we together had a very important program on the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce and others. They had organized a very big get-together as to how can Sri Lanka now become and progress on economic path. Same with India. We also want to build a stronger economy, a vibrant economy, and in the immediate future, if you can quantify this overall vision, you want to be $5 trillion economy. And when you are growing and want to accomplish that, you obviously cannot accomplish it without having partners with you, because today's world is interconnected. It's already interdependent. And therefore, making India and Sri Lanka grow together will benefit both the countries at the same time. Sri Lanka, as I said, is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. It's a country whose human development record, if you go by what UNDP calculates, is exemplary. And they had difficulties. They had to fight wars. They had different challenges in the past. But despite that, their social development was a commendable exercise. And today, we can build a partnership for economic development, but also learn from each other. We can learn from Sri Lanka as to how can we accomplish social development of this kind. High literacy rate, more or less all human development parameters are so good, and therefore this is something which we can learn from each other and can develop together. I always realize that Sri Lanka being so beautiful, it's a tourist attraction. India also has some very beautiful tourist spots. It's a time that we develop joint tourism ideas. So when people come from any part of the world, come to India, they can go to Sri Lanka, they can come to Sri Lanka, they can come to India, and we can offer a very interesting package for them to see two countries on one visit. Like in the US, you always say, buy one, get one. So you can say that you can actually get opportunities to see two when you are visiting one. And there are so many ideas. For example, I was always saying that Sri Lanka's unique location, geographical location, which already has made it one of the top shipping destinations. So much of transshipment happens in Sri Lanka. But because of that very strategic location, India and of course Sri Lanka and with so many other countries, the maritime security, etc., are different issues. Very good potential on that count as well. But I am talking about, because of that location, Sri Lanka's wind velocity makes it a very attractive destination for generating the cleanest form of energy in the world, wind energy. The plant load factor for a wind project in Sri Lanka would be that of double of India. You can make 40% PLF for a wind project in Sri Lanka, when in India, we normally have it less than 20%. So just imagine the same investment of CapEx, you can have double the power generation, so you can imagine the advantage. And being the cleanest power and renewable power, you can always harness it there and sell it to countries which need it. And which country in the world can, I'd said before, the wind is such that when it blows, it goes. So you cannot get it back. Like I said, you cannot change the past. Same day, you cannot get that wind which has already gone to come back again. But we are not losing by generating electricity, because some more wind is coming the following hour, following day, following month, following years. So you can actually generate something which can give huge royalty from India to Sri Lanka, in which Sri Lanka can benefit, India can benefit, and we can develop a joint project which can bring in peace and prosperity for both the countries in the world. So I have so many such ideas, but I think with a most senior leader in this part of the world as well as anywhere else. We'd be very happy to get a vision of what it should be and what it could be from Ranil Wickremesinghe, and we can actually develop on that. But I'm very impressed by the fact that this young group of individuals, youngsters, have thinking about a vision in today's times when the world order is changing. Multilateralism is under threat. Countries are turning inward. We are more concerned about petty issues than thinking about a broader vision. And at a time like this, when the world is struggling to find out ideas how we can work together and make best of the post-COVID situation, they have come forward with this Binding Bharat vision. The binding is necessary and not winding is necessary. You don't have to wind up ideas, but bind it and work together to make it happen in a much better way. So I think Binding Bharat is finding solution to tomorrow's world. This is going to help us in ensuring that the situation may be challenging today, but there is not just a silver lining, but there is also golden lining probably to this dark cloud that is surrounding us. Therefore, look at that part of the cloud rather than just getting overawed by the darkness that surrounds us today in this COVID situation. So let's come out of it and try to think for the better part of what we can do together. So thank you very much. Once again, congratulations to the young girls and young boys of today who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. So after a few years, if I would be invited to speak, I'll have to keep saying that thanks to this great vision of these great young minds, we are now in a much better world than what it was when I first came and addressed this forum. So congratulations to once again. Let me once again thank my dear friend and a great leader, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, for joining this program. We are honored by your presence, and I'm sure I will get more opportunities to meet you, work with you, and shape the common good of all of us together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, sir. It was such a profound, intellectual, and insightful talk by you. Now, I would request Honorable ex-Prime Minister to please enlighten us all with his insights on the subject. Sir.
Do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. First, I must thank Binding Bharat. You are looking at the future. We are looking at a future in which you will have a globalized system without a globalized leadership, where regions are going to be much more important. And this is going to be the case of the Indian Ocean. I am happy to have Suresh here with us. He's done his own part in the last few years of bringing our two nations together. Both under Sri Vajpayee and Sri Narendra Modi, you've always advocated closer relations between Sri Lanka and India. Well, we are all one family. And another person, therefore, whom I must mention today, it would be a miss if he doesn't, who's done his own service to us, is the former president, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, who's today in hospital. I know the valuable contribution he has made because the last 2 decades has seen successive Indian governments moving closer into the region. And I've had the occasion and the privilege to talk with Prime Minister Modi how we work together, because this is going to be the growth area. And certainly COVID-19 is a challenge for all of us. But it means recreating the international order, recreating part of the economic order, while keeping to our basic values of democracy, human rights, our cultural ties. So this is where we are important, because Asia is going to play an important role. When we are recreating markets, I think the fact that India is in a position with its internal markers to recover is a strong point. And if you are looking at the region, India and Sri Lanka's economic assets are complementary. It has been in the past. It is today. We are in a strategic location, center of the Indian Ocean, but then you are a subcontinent and a landmass which juts out into the Indian Ocean and which has in fact influenced the whole region. If you look at the Southeast Asia, how much of Indian influence is there? How much we can link up with East Africa? So, whatever happens in the coming year or so, which will be difficult, this is going to be a growth region. How do we work together? I think as far as our cultures are concerned, there is no issue at all. I think the relations between us, as more people travel in between, is good. How to get business? I've always said, if the Indians, 5 southern states and Sri Lanka get together, we will have economy larger than that of Sweden. And how we can work together is what we've got to work out. And it's not merely the sphere of economics, the sphere of education. When you see more and more Sri Lankans going to India, in the field of law, which is common to all of us, the fields of medicine, virtually every field, we can work together. And just as much as the culture we got, of the common culture we share from nearly 2000 years ago to 2500 years ago, we also have something new in that we value democracy. We value our sovereignty. We value human rights. Some of it are based maybe on the edicts of Emperor Asoka. But nevertheless, we've always stood firm on this. And there's much that we can do working together to spread that message to other parts of Asia. But just as much as Sri Lanka and India work together, we have also got to reach and see how we merge ourselves with the rest of Asia, with the new developments that are coming in East Asia, Southeast Asia, with the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. How are we going to fit ourselves? How do you work with each other? How does BIMSTEC work? How does South Asia work? So these are the issues, both on people-to-people level, as well as government-to-government level, and the third one, economy-to-economy level. I think that I put that in shortly because I see a lot of young professionals. It's their generation that are to take over and let them make their contribution and ask us the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very, very, very much. I feel extremely honored to hear such intellectual ideas from respected sir. I request our co-founder, Mr. Harmanjot Singh Gill, who is a well-known lawyer from Chandigarh, to deliver a vote of thanks to both the dignitaries. Harman.
Thank you, Rathod. On the behalf of Team Binding Bharat, I extend my warm greetings to Honorable former Prime Minister, sir, and Honorable Member Parliament. Sir, your words were like shower of wisdom on us. Your presence was enlightening, and all what you said really resembled what we aspire to achieve. My friends from Sri Lanka keep on telling me about your able leadership, sir. How prosperous you made your nation. It is truly remarkable. I also had the honor to meeting Honorable former Prime Minister when we visited his house during SWI 30, Ship for World Youth Program back in 2017. That meeting left me a huge impact on me. We all in India are equally aware of Honorable Member Parliament's contribution in nation building. The common man on road still misses the people's railway minister. Thank you, sirs, for taking time for us. We fall short of words to express our gratitude and respect to both of you. Thank you.
Well said, Harman. Well said. So we understand that you both have time constraints and that you committed for this much time only. But at the end, I would say that it was such a pleasure to hear two gentlemen of your stature speak. For youngsters like us, your words really mean wisdom. And this is going to stay with us for times to come. We're really, really, really thankful to you, sir. Thank you very much and very, very warm regards, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now, carrying the program forward, I would like to invite our first guest speaker, respected N.K. Kakkar, sir. Sir. Haman, can we assist him on this?
Hello,
Sir, audible, sir.
are you getting me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, friends, I'm really thankful to the organizers of Binding Bharat for having given me this opportunity to talk to you. Particularly, I'm thankful to the two dignitaries, Sri Suresh Prabhuji and ex-Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Vikram Singheji, for having spoken in this very seminar. Friends, I have a different perspective on which I'm going to speak. I know that the time at my disposal is very short, but still I'll try to make my observations. I'm looking at the bilateral setu between India and Sri Lanka, and therefore I'm going to talk of a few things which to me are quite important in building and further strengthening this setu, and therefore I'm just starting, from 1950s. Perhaps you'll be surprised that I'm talking of that time. But then 1950 is a time which was formative in my life, formative years of my life. I remember in 1953-54, being in India, I used to listen Radio Ceylon. I'm not sure how many of you must have heard about it, but there was Radio Ceylon which was broadcasting Binaka Geet Mala, if you could remember that they were doing. I mean, in fact, Radio Ceylon is the first broadcasting radio in Asia after Europe 3 years. So it used to broadcast Binaka Geet Mala, and since I had some interest in music, I used to listen to Binaka Geet Mala. I remember 1955, and perhaps maybe you do remember, there was a movie known as Shri 420, and it had a song, Mera Juta Hai Japani. You would not believe, Amin Saini, who used to compare that program for all 52 weeks in the year 1955, that song was number one, and that is how it went on. So I just remember the relationship between Radio Ceylon and myself, and used to think as to how that Radio Ceylon would be. But then this is what happened, and this happened till 1988. Only in 1988 that this went on to Vivid Bharati. So that is how long that the story went on. I remember somebody told me that Baju Bawra was a movie which missed this Binaka Geetmala because it was started in 1953 and Baju Bawra was released in 1952. Oh, Duniya Ke Rakhwale is a song perhaps nobody would be able to forget. So that's where I find that the beginning of my life, the relationship of myself with Ceylon, or what we call as Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka got independence in February 1948 or 4th February 1948 is the date. But then that apart, that's one aspect on which I always cherish, and I will continue to cherish. Second thing, perhaps my friend will recall that India has binding relations as far as cricketing world is concerned. And today when I'm talking about it, naturally, I'm reminded of MS Dhoni, who has retired only yesterday from the world cricket. But remember, I'm just only trying to mention, not plus or minus, not victory or defeat, but the fact that India and Sri Lanka played in the World Cup in 2011, and fortunately India won. But then that is a game. That is how we played. But then that is not the part that I'm saying. 1975, for the first time we find that in Sri Lanka played the World Cup. 1981, they in fact came to the Test cricket. And today, if I look at the ranking of India and Sri Lanka as far as Test cricket is concerned, India is at number 3 and Sri Lanka is at number 5. So that's how the relationship that goes on. But I had an opportunity of visiting Sri Lanka almost 2 years ago. I went to Colombo From Colombo to Bentota. From Bentota, I went to Gale. You would perhaps be surprised, why did I go to Gale? Because Gale International Cricket Stadium is one of the most beautiful stadiums in the world. And therefore, I wanted to see that. And believe me, it was really wonderful. See on almost three sides of the stadium, or two and a half, two-thirds side, and that is how it is. But then, do we remember that India had the first wicket record of 413 runs against New Zealand for a long time, for about 55 years. But then Sri Lanka holds today the record for second wicket and third wicket in the Test cricket. So that is how the cricket and India are related. Sri Lanka and India are related. One more aspect that would be of interest: IPL. Don't you remember that there are so many Sri Lankan players who are coming to India to play IPL? The last IPL, Lasith Malinga, Angelo Matthews, these are the two very popular names who were there. But when I was in Gale, when I went there, when I looked, somebody referred to me that Maila Jayawardene and Sangikara perhaps belong to that particular place. So that is how the whole thing started, and I feel that cricket has been a binding force between the two countries, and this will remain as such. But then I cannot forget the democratic aspect of the two countries. We in India have democracy surviving for such a long time now. Since 1952, we have been having elections almost every time, and that is the case with Sri Lanka also. Sri Lanka has two political parties, two important political parties. That is, we have Sri Lankan Freedom Party and United National Party. United National Party is the party to which Shri Vikram Singhaji belongs to. Now, recall, November last year, our the president of Sri Lanka now, I'll just say, yeah, Gotabaya Rajapakse was elected in November 19, and only 25th of this month we have the elections to Parliament of Sri Lanka, and this Gotabaya party won 145 seats out of 225. I'm only trying to remind one thing: democracy is one thing which can unite both of us. Democracy is one thing on which India and Sri Lanka can take laurels. This is what has been happening, and this will happen. And I hope if the two countries remain as friends, as far as this is concerned, this is just going to help them. But unfortunately, when I look to my neighbors, naturally, some sort of democracy we call the so-called democracy in our next neighbor, Pakistan. But then we have the other countries also, Afghanistan, China. Just look at what type of democratic processes do they have. But still, I'm not going to into detail of that. But do remember that we do have a democratic process which is similar to that, similar to us. And this is going to bring binding aspects as far as Binding Bharat is concerned. And I, because of shortage of time, may not be talking much greater on all these aspects. But remember, politically, both the countries are stronger in politics, and both the countries are doing very well. And I feel that this is going to help us as far as this is concerned. So therefore, please see that Bharat, Binding Bharat is going to go forward as far as this is concerned, and the setu between India and Sri Lanka is going to strengthen day by day. Thank you so much. Within the time that I had, I have tried to put it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Such beautiful stories and memories you have. Now, I would like to invite the next speaker, who is from Sri Lanka, George Cook, sir. Can we have Mr. George Cook on the main screen?
Okay, thank you so very much. to the organizers for the invitation extended, for allowing me to share my views on this particular platform and be a part of this discussion this evening. A very, very timely moment. India has just celebrated Independence Day. Sri Lanka has just completed a general election. One of the main platforms which has already been emphasized and discussed has been the historic connection based on religious diplomacy, or we'll talk about Buddhist diplomacy. And this is something that has cemented our two countries for centuries. This is something that has bound us together. We've had occasions on which relations have soared. We've had occasions on which relations have soured as well. Yet, one of the most fundamental factors that we've got to always bear in mind is that the strength of the foundation, irrespective of what happens, irrespective of developments that take place between our two countries, our geographic connection, our historic connection, our religious connection, our political connection, and very importantly, our economic connection binds us together as two inseparable countries in the context of South Asia. When it comes to foreign policy formulation in Sri Lanka, India remains a constant, a cornerstone, a key factor that is always taken on board, that is always borne in mind. Why is this? What would change? What has changed? Will it change? On the contrary, this is where, irrespective of which period of history we examine from independence onwards, irrespective of political party in office, irrespective of personality leading the country, Sri Lanka has remained a crucial factor, a country that we can never ignore, that we have to always bear in mind remains a key ally within the region, a country that comes to us on the first instance of a natural disaster, some kind of damage that may be caused within the country. One of the first responders is India, and India has proven that. This was even proven just last week with the conclusion of the election, the first international call emanated from Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. This goes to show the centrality of our relationship, and also the fact that whether it is in New Delhi or whether it is in Colombo, the strength, the importance of the relationship only continues to grow. I want to look at the bigger picture in my intervention. There have been very valuable points that have been raised by our chief guests this evening, as well as Professor Kakar also, and I'm sure will also be raised by our other panelists this evening, where we can look at ways and means through which we identify tangible measures, measures through which we are going to take our relationship forward. Frequent interactions at the summit level between the leadership of the two countries, between the legislatures of the two countries, between the judiciaries of the two countries, whether it be in the sporting arena, whether it be in whatever plethora of area of activity our two countries enjoy, greater connectivity. Our people have to meet, just like our leaders have to meet, so do our people. Suresh ji also mentioned the fact of tourism, using it, one destination and going to two countries, combining our policies, combining our approaches and policies, deepening of trade ties, widening of the economic connections that we enjoy. We have a free trade agreement which must be expanded that much further. We've got to understand the potential, not just of working with one state, two states, but across India. This is the enormity of the size of this country. This country possesses diversity, potential, progress, markets, opportunities for Sri Lanka. And from a Sri Lankan perspective, it's a country that is on a very important wicket at the moment, to use a cricketing term of Professor Kakar as well. Sri Lanka, India and Sri Lanka are on a very, very good wicket at this current stage, which needs to be taken note of, which needs to be enhanced that much further. Whether we look at widening our shipping connectivity, talking about the Indian Ocean, talking about the patrolling of the Indian Ocean, talking about revitalization of joint collaboration in the Indian Ocean, there is so much more that our two countries can do together. But whilst that remains a very important factor, which I know will be delved in much deeper today, I want to take the discussion onto another level. And that is look at not just Sri Lanka and India, but look at South Asia. Look at what we can do. Look at the potential that we possess. Look at what this century is. We're talking about the Asian century. We are 20 years into the 21st century. We are at a very, very important juncture. We've got to assert our position in the world as Asian countries. We have a South Asian identity. We need to also be mindful of the greater involvement of our country with the rest of Asia, irrespective of the part. South Asia has huge potential of working together, and this is something that came up just a few months ago. COVID brought with it a lot of problems, a lot of death, a lot of suffering to people. It brought about mental trauma. It brought about so many negative factors. But something very, very positive emanated in our region, and that was the virtual summit proposed and initiated by Prime Minister Modi. This platform, bringing leaders together, at least on the virtual level, was so very significant, was so very important, because it shows the potential we have. If we want to work together, we can work together, and we better work together. If we don't, we're going to lose out on a wonderful opportunity, which later on, 50, 100 years from now, we're going to look back and regret decisions that were taken at this point, if we let our South Asian unity, grouping, organization suffer or die a natural death. This is something that must not be allowed to happen on any front. When we strategize and we look at that bigger picture of what we can do, it is the responsibility of all our countries in South Asia. India plays a very crucial role. So does Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has played a very pivotal role in the past on varied occasions. We go back to the early 1960s. Prime Minister Sirimao Bandaranaike took initiative to facilitate discussions between India and China. That was a very momentous step forward. She was a very new on the world stage, where marking her 60th anniversary of becoming the first woman prime minister this year. And she took a very bold step in helping two friends of Sri Lanka, India and China. We did not want any form of violence. We did not want any form of tension. We wanted to allay that. And this is where Sri Lanka possesses massive opportunity of helping countries in the region see, realize, understand the potential if we get together, if we work together. No one needs to leave. No one needs to enter the grouping. We've got an ideal arrangement. We are looking at geography. This is something that Prime Minister Modi also mentioned at his first SAARC summit, which unfortunately was the last SAARC summit that we witnessed, where he said, let us work to change cynicism into optimism. Undoubtedly, there is much cynicism in the region, but this is something that can be changed. And this is something that Sri Lanka and India can do, can collectively focus on. He also said, let us turn South Asia of flowering hope into a rich field of peace and prosperity. Until and unless we realize the potential, the synergy of us working together, until and unless we realize the opportunity that we can derive, when we look at our connections, which are not merely dating back to our independence, this is very, very important. Lots of countries in the world mark diplomatic connectivity based on their dates of independence or the dates on which countries have come into existence. Sri Lanka and India enjoy a unique platform. History has bound us. Certainly our interactions from then now have kept us together. The future looks extremely positive, extremely progressive, if, only if we realize, if we grab the opportunity, if we strategize, if we look at the joint collaboration activity, only then are we going to realize the synergetic effect, impact of what we can do as two collective countries working in the context of South Asia. We've got to contribute towards the achievement of the Asian century. We've got to be stakeholders. We've got to lay claim to the Asian century. We've got to be participants. We've got to ride the wave. For countries to do that, we've got to put aside certain misgivings. We've got to put aside history. We've got to put aside the past. There are certain aspects which bedevil relations, but as Lakshman Kadirgama observed many, many years ago, and it was actually 20 years ago that he made the observation, when he talked about the region, when he talked about us coming together, and he said it has to happen, we will overcome the problems that beset us now. These are problems that bedevil relations among some of us. They are intractable, but not insoluble. There is a vast reservoir of goodwill among all the people of our region, which in time will propel the member states concerned to get together, to bury their differences and move SAARC along. It is now our responsibility to keep SAARC alive. It's very important for us to get involved in regional groupings within the context of the larger part of Asia, whether it's in BIMSTEC. There's huge opportunity. BIMSTEC is connecting South Asia and the ASEAN region. Wonderful platform, wonderful opportunities can be derived from such interaction and engagement. But what we've got to realize, and what we realized with COVID, was the importance of our neighborhood. You and I can change our neighborhoods. We can change houses. We can change areas in which we live. Countries can't do that. We've got to realize the importance of our neighbors, work together, look at what fruitful outcomes can be achieved through that progress of engagement, and understand that it is only through the process of strategizing, understanding the importance that both of our countries are going to play a very, very important role in the achievement of the Asian century and have a crucial stake, not only in South Asia, but also in the world. Thank you.
Well, sir, that was such an intellectual talk by you, and we had a great learning as well. And the references you made, they were wonderful. Thank you very much, sir. Now, I would like to call our next speaker.
So, a very good evening to all of you. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Prasanjit. Thank you, Kanupriya. Thank you, Prasanjit. And thank you, Herman, for inviting me and making me think about such an important issue, which has been there always in the back of our minds. It has been part of our subconscious. For which Indian is there who can wish away the happenings of Ramayana? I don't think there is an Indian who can say that he does not know or she does not know Lanka, Sri Lanka. So I have, my fellow speakers before me, the Honorable Member Parliament and His Excellency, Mr. Ranil Wickramasinghe, have pointed out, they have flagged some very important issues. I have titled my small talk, Building Bridges in a Post-COVID World Order, the Way Forward for Sri Lanka and India. What are going to be the characteristics of a new world order that we see emerging in the times to come? First of all, just a small line on what is the world order. The world order talks about who is the boss, which is the country that is going to decide what most of the countries are going to do. And in the post-COVID situation, we see the world order changing. And why do we see it changing? First of all, we see a breakdown of Chimerica, the combination of China and America, which is very obvious to all of us. The second thing we see in the changing world order is the weakening of US as a world leader. And this COVID situation has brought it home to most of us that we can no longer look towards the United States of America to lead the world as it was, as per the prophecy of Fukuyama when he talked about the end of history. Another thing that's going to happen in the post-COVID world is, at least for some time, the hardening of intra as well as international borders. And there is going to be a collapse of globalization, which is something that with great foresight our respectable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has also pointed out when he is pushing us towards, when he is encouraging us towards Atmanirbharta. So what does it mean for all of us? It means that we have to look for more regional cooperation. We have to look more towards our immediate neighbors. My dear friends, as a student of geography, as a teacher of geography, I would like to bring home one point, and that is that we are all essentially prisoners of geography, something that we cannot change, and that is what the speaker right before me also brought home, is our neighbors, our geographical neighbors. Something we cannot change is the geographical and geopolitical reality that we live in. In the case of India and Sri Lanka, that is the shared Indian Ocean rim. the three countries that share the Indian Ocean Rim, along with India and Sri Lanka. The third one is Maldives. So it becomes important. And now with the Indo-Pacific strategy that is going on with all countries in the Indo-Pacific region looking towards the Indian Ocean, this becomes even more important, that we have to take a position of preeminence. Both India and Sri Lanka have to take a position of preeminence over there. Another thing that's going to is likely to happen in the post-COVID world order is the rise of a more aggressive China. We can all see that most countries in the world, in fact, all countries in the world, have seen an economic slowdown, an economic downturn, except for China, and China is on the rise all over again. China in the past many years has been known to become more and more aggressive. Its diplomats are often known as wolf warriors, a term which is taken from a very popular Chinese movie. I think most of the youngsters may have seen it. Now, with this kind of a world order, what can India and Sri Lanka do together? We have to look towards our commonalities. Some of them have already been pointed out. Some of them are very obvious, our geographical and geopolitical realities. One thing that has not been pointed out so far is the commonality of language that exists. I don't know how many of you know, but both Sinhalese and India and Hindustani belong to the Indo-Aryan group of languages. Despite a physical distance, the language that was adopted by Sri Lanka belonged to the Indo-Aryan group and not the Dravidian group. So this is a thing that we have to, think about, and we have to ponder that what is it that, the contact of India and Sri Lanka, how far back it went. And language, you see, is a very, very important component, a very, very important element of our culture. And this is something that we cannot wish away, even if we wish to, even if we want to. Buddhism traveled from India to Sri Lanka. We all know that. Something that I would like to bring home right now is that the diplomat who took Buddhism to Sri Lanka was also called Mahinda. He was the son of King Ashok. And the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka today is also Mahinda. This is how deeply Buddhism, this is how deeply Indianism is entrenched in Sri Lanka, and this is how close we feel to Sri Lanka, or Ceylon, how as Kakkarji was referring to it. I may also add that I have been a very, very avid listener of Radio Ceylon as well. Cricket was another thing that was raised, and I was a great fan of Chaminda Was. I don't know how many of you know, but Chaminda Was trained in the Pace Academy in India. He was a fast bowler. He has set some amazing records in cricket. Both India and Sri Lanka are multi-ethnic countries, and both India and Sri Lanka are having to deal with regional aspirations. And we have to come to terms with these facts. Mr. Anil Wickramasinghe is a person who I see as a man of peace in Sri Lanka. And it is very interesting that when he was Prime Minister, the Prime Minister that we had in India was Atalji, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, whose first death anniversary falls today, incidentally, was also a great man of peace. He was a man of poetry as well. So it is very, very interesting that both of them were there together. And today we should be talking about both of them together. So peace is very important for both of us. Both of our countries have also been victims of terrorism. And both of us need to combat terrorism. Terrorism, which is, a challenge which is facing almost the entire world, but it is facing more some countries than others. Both Sri Lanka and India have faced terrorism, have lost due to terrorism. So where are our opportunities for collaboration? Most of my previous speakers have flagged most of these as well. So I will also just very briefly talk about it and give some more time to the speakers that follow. There is economic collaboration, of course. India is a huge market for Sri Lanka. But more than that, as an educator, I think the field of education offers immense possibilities. It offers immense opportunities. And I remember in the early 1990s, when I was a student in Punjab University, we had a number of students from Sri Lanka. It is sad that this has stopped. I mean, the number of students coming from Sri Lanka has petered out. Maybe they are going to other universities. Maybe Punjab University is not fortunate. But I do remember that we had some very good ties with them. They were very, we had some very fond memories with them. And I also share fond memories with some of them who were my hostel mates, in fact. So the recipes we exchanged, the geographical backgrounds and the barriers that we overcame at that point of time, I still hold those very, very dear to me. Now, the situation being what it is in Sri Lanka, I think India should and has a major role to play in bringing peace and prosperity to Sri Lanka. And that is one of the things that should be one of the goals of India as, let's say, I wouldn't say a big brother, but definitely an elder in the relationship. Another thing that I would like to mention is that it is today time to move forward. And in which direction are we going to move forward, and what are our strengths? Of course, the previous speakers have talked about South Asia as a region and other countries in South Asia. They have talked about East Asia. The realities of East Asia and Southeast Asia are something also we have to take into account. There are some countries here which are home grounds for terrorism. We have to look into that. The thing that brings Sri Lanka and India together, most of all, is of course their democratic cultures. And this democracy does not just, exist within the country. For India, at least, it just does not exist within the country. For India, democracy poets, it says, "Hum ke tehre ajnabi itni madaraton ke baad." We who are still not known to each other, we who are still strangers to each other, despite all the hospitalities that we show to each other. Phir banenge aashna kitni mulaqaton ke baad. Let us now become friends once again. Let us now meet each other more often. Let us now have more people-to-people contact. And I think the relevance of Binding Bharat is this, that it is bringing the people of Sri Lanka closer to the people of India. So my dear friends from Sri Lanka, it has been very nice to have you here, and I will sign off with this message of mine. Thank you so much.
Beautiful, ma'am, beautiful. Thank you very much. Such an erudite talk by you to invite our next speaker, Dr. V.S. Negi, sir. Sir.
Good evening, friends. Program in this Corona times, it was very much required. Friends, as far as geography and politics are concerned in the region, it is important to underline that our world is not only limited to conflicts like India, Bangladesh, etc., but there do exist a positive picture of Bharat, Sri Lanka, peace and cooperation needs to be highlighted. Most of the discussions and debates in the world are nowadays aims at highlighting the controversies and conflicts. It gives me immense pleasure to be part of this particular initiative of Binding Bharat, and I would like to congratulate all the young members of Binding Bharat Bharat. For India and Sri Lanka have a long history of cultural, political, maritime, strategic ties. We always believe that big growth and development, where humanity and peace remain a central role. In this process and in our journey to new era, especially in the 21st century, people's driven political cooperation will lead to a peaceful coexistence of all citizens in the region in particular and in group in general. Our rich intellectual and spiritual heritage born out of Vedic and Buddhist culture lead us to far forward in the coming time. India and Sri Lanka have faced the problem of terrorism in the 80s and both the countries have successfully dealt with it. It is only a threat to locals in all respects, but at the same time, it hinders the prospects of countries' development at the global level. In broader perspective, what two countries, India and Sri Lanka, can do to counter terrorism from a basic model is one, to promote bilateral ties in the form of forums, to share the technological and infrastructural platforms, to establish common force, considering that terrorism within any of us is our common enemy and common threat. Third, working out a plan, a roadmap where adopting in any action of war will be removed. A basic call terrorism. And fourth, global model of combating terrorism in the present day world is appear to be blasts, war, bloodshed, killings, and mass destruction of humans and humanity. India's 6 years under the able leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi have shown the world a new way to combating terrorism in Kashmir by providing power to common people. We must follow this and practice this. At the end, I would like to mention here what our Prime Minister announced yesterday from the Red Fort on 74th Independence Day. I quote, India is connecting with its neighbors, whether they are connected to us through land or sea, with partnership of security, development and trust. Today, neighbors are not only those who share the same geographical boundaries, but also those who meet our hearts. Where there is harmony in relationships, there is a amity. So I would like to congratulate you all. I wish you all the best that you took this initiative, and basically I am very happy to be part of your organization and this program, that so many energetic youngsters are thinking this way. So thank you very much. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, sir. Our next speaker is Dr. Ashok Kumar, sir. Before I invite him, I would like to tell our viewers, respected Ashok Kumar, sir. Sir.
ਵੀ ਕਲਵੀਰ ਨੂੰ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਮਾਰਿਓ ਵੀ ਕਲਵੀਰ ਨੂੰ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਮਾਰਿਓ ਯਾਰ
Okay, I think the connection is not proper. I would like to invite our next speaker, Maisha Balraj ma'am.
I would like to thank the organizers Binding Bharat and Rathor and Karipriya for bringing us together, and thank you for the invitation extended and for this opportunity to make a small intervention. Esteemed dignitaries and friends, we have spoken much about our historic connections and how our countries have bound together and cemented through various things like cricket, culture, democracy, and so on. Some valuable discussion and points have already been put forward and brought into this discourse by the chief guests and the esteemed presenters who have presented before me. In the best interest of time, I'm going to dive directly into exploring an area and an opportunity for young people that I feel will benefit us economically, politically, and socially. So we right now live in an era where more and more young people are moving away from the traditional politics of party politics, and they're trying to find a new politic. And this is very much true for young people in Sri Lanka. And I'm positive we have similar narratives and similar discourses with young people in India. As a result, youth have been engaging in digital and online activism. They have expressed that they would like to align themselves towards more inclusive and less divisive practices and policies in the political sphere. So if you look around us, there have been many such initiatives and efforts of digital activism by young people around the globe to uphold human rights and democracy. And most of these initiatives right now and examples that I have explored are national. And maybe it is time to build those bridges and transcend borders and extend these efforts and work in collaboration. At this point, I would also like to highlight one such national initiative in Sri Lanka to give an example and then to see how we can take this further and extend it and take it from Sri Lanka to India. And as presenters have already mentioned, it would benefit if we look at the South Asian region as a whole too. There were a group of young people who I had the chance to work with who ran a social media newsroom with trilingual capacity in Sri Lanka. And they were observing social media platforms ahead of both the presidential election in November 2019 and the recently concluded general election in August 2020. They were looking at different human rights violations, election law violations, hate speech, false news that would potentially cause harm in the offline space, harassment, and many other such important and vital democratical and human rights issues. There were some interesting findings from these reports. There were election violations that were disaggregated by the stage of election and by party affiliation. False news and hate speech was also disaggregated by the stage of the campaign process and also the target communities. It was an interesting collaboration in this initiative because there was a chance to work directly with the Elections Commission of Sri Lanka and also Facebook. And there was a real-time dashboard where the reporting was done every hour directly to Facebook and Elections Commission. So during these periods, there was an average of 43% takedown of content that was reported as harmful by Facebook. And there's also statistics to show that there was a 24.41% response rate by Facebook of taking down content within 12 hours of reporting. So a similar exercise was also carried during the COVID-19 pandemic, looking at harmful content, looking at human rights issues and violations. What is unique about today's discussion is that we can actually take these initiatives that are done in countries across our borders, and these are opportunities that we can look to work with young people in India, because there is, as we've already discussed, there is so much in common between us. There are so much commonalities, and a presenter before me also mentioned about the commonalities in languages. And because of this unique opportunity, the geopolitical context and the political realities of our country, this online activism and the digital activism is an area that we can further explore, further collaborate, and it's an endless opportunity, it's a field of endless opportunities. So we need to see, hopefully, that this will go beyond just Sri Lanka and India and will be an example to take it to the South Asian region as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It was a pleasure listening to you. We couldn't establish connection with Mr. Ashok Kumar, so I guess he's back with us. Can we please have Mr. Ashok Kumar, sir? So, I would request you to turn on your audio, sir.
Hello.
Sir, audible, sir.
Yes, good evening, sir. How are you?
Very fine, sir. Sir.
Yes, sir.
So your talk on the Ram Setu.
Yes, we are talking about Ram Setu.
So you did exemplary work on that. We would like to hear your contribution and whatever you did in the field.
Yes, I am last 17 to 18 years. I am researching regarding this Ramayana. So I found this is a very important place in both countries, India and Sri Lanka. So that's why we are today talking about our two countries matters, how we are talking, developing and youth we are attracting to our this subject. So I found there, and I will start my journey with the ZTV, you know. So from Rameshwaram, Dhanushkoti and Pampavan. Then after that, deep sea, we are crossed with boats and up to Talai, Mannar and Ketu. There is a 6 village in the entire Ram Setu. So that is the most important place we can say in the world. The both community in Buddhist community and Hindu community, both sides, you know. So that is the biggest peak point in Ramayana period and Mahabharata period. After that Buddha period, because Lord Buddha also visit 3 times in Sri Lanka. And Mahabharata, there returns in Mahabharata Shloka. There is a Bhim son, Gatotkacha. Also, he visit with the Ram Setu, with the Sahadev, Pandav Putra. So this is the Ramayana period. We are crossed all Vanar Sena with the Ram Setu, and after that Buddha period, Lord Buddha also crossed with the Ram Setu, and after that one Muslim leader also crossed with this Ram Setu called Adam. So that's why a lot of peoples, they are talking about Adam Bridge. So that is the Adam Bridge, also called similar with Ram Setu, Nala Setu. And after that, after 500 years and 510 510 years back, Guru Nanak ji also visited with this Ram Setu. So that is the main, actually, with the connection with both countries. So we have found near about 6 pillars inside the sea, and some people are believing there is a floating stone bridge. But in the science, and we have a lot of research done, the marines, engineers, and scientists, people also involved with this one. And we found there is a 4 or 5 types of material using in this entire Ram Setu. So though that is the fact, because some people, both youth peoples are not believe like that. Ram Setu have millions years ago and 1,000 years ago. How this can happen? So that period and Ramayana period, because a lot of people in
Sir,
2004 I start my research there, and that times LTT cover this area, and
sir,
we are also 2007 or 8 we are entered there this area, because before 2004 or 5, because nobody like to visit there, because discovered by LTT that time very peak in particular this area, Tallai, Mannar. After that Anuradhapura, we are not going to cross the Anuradhapura. So that's why we are discussed with today with the Ram Setu. This is the very unique and very important place in the both countries, and there
sir,
with the curiosity of youth is
sir.
a very important place of this one.
Very well said, sir. Very well said. I would like to inform our viewers and participants that Sir contributed immensely in the field of researching Ram Setu. In fact, Sir organized a historic visit of Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi ji to Ram Setu a few years back. Thank you, sir. It
Yeah,
was a pleasure hearing you.
that
Sir,
that time I am also with him, so you can see my program on YouTube and Google, because
sir,
I
sir.
am the person who receiving the first man to Modi sir.
We are aware, sir. We are aware, sir. Sir, sir. Right, sir. Now, moving forward, I would like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Anurag Sharma. He's an assistant professor in Delhi University. Sir, over to you.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Prasanna.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Thanks to
Welcome, sir.
team Binding Bharat for organizing such an exceptional talk, and also thanks them for inviting me to this conference. As many of the speakers have expressed their views clearly and with a positive spirit, I would also like to take this torch ahead. And as my profession and basic education is, I would like to touch base upon some of the basic areas of commerce and economy, and will also leave a scope open for further discussion and conferences like this. To start with, I would like to say Sri Lanka has braved many adversities in the recent past and came up as an undisputed champion in various areas of cooperation with India. And as they say, a new dawn whenever comes, it brings great opportunities for development. I still remember Ranil ji's visit to India in September 2015, his first overseas visit after being appointed as the Prime Minister. And that was a very positive move towards India, which brings in new hopes in the political and diplomatic relations between the two nations. Sri Lanka has long been a priority destination for direct investment from India. And also in SAARC, Sri Lanka is one of India's largest trading partners. And nonetheless to say, trade between the two countries grew particularly after the India-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, which I'm not mistaken, which took place around 2 decades ago in the year 2000. And since then, there is no looking back. And recently, bilateral trade among the two nations has caused around $6 billion. Odin shares many other platforms, and SAARC, South Asian Cooperation Program, South Asian Economic Union, and BIMSTEC are noteworthy among them. India is also one of the largest investors in Sri Lanka, with cumulative investments of around $1.5 billion as per the recent data. Indians are there in Sri Lanka, not in very large number, but around 14,000 odd numbers expatriates are living in Sri Lanka and are very well placed. The cultural ties which India shares with Sri Lanka make it more homely for Indians to reside there. India is Sri Lanka's closest neighbor, as everyone knows. The relationship between the two countries is more than 2,500 years old from the time of Kunta. And both sides have built upon a legacy of intellectual, cultural, regional, and linguistic intercourse. During the ages, both the nations have seen many ups and downs in their relations, and I have no grudges to say that India, I will again repeat, I have no grudges to say that India, whenever needed, supported Sri Lanka with all the possible resources and power, whether it be the civilian war or it be the LTT or whatever. Where it's an open area of discussion that India and Sri Lanka has plenty to give and take from each other in terms of resources and technology. Sri Lanka has its own expertise in many sectors, and India can be seen by them as a huge market for them, and vice versa also holds good. I would like to give an example. It's like recently NTPC has proposed a 500 megawatt power project in Sri Lanka, which I think will further strengthen the exchange of resources in terms of technology and logistics. I would specifically like to touch base because we are in this COVID-19 pandemic, and I was of the opinion that without touching this point and without going into deep into this thing, our conference and discussion will not hold good. I would especially like to touch base upon the recent challenge that the whole world is facing, is COVID-19 pandemic. The reasons are many to blame a specific region of the world for this unprecedented situation. But having said that, it has also given an opportunity to both the countries and world at large to make some major changes in their diplomatic and regional policies. Time and again, the cordial relations between India and Sri Lanka are hampered by them. I'm expecting that everybody is getting where am I pointing out. But with our cultural and diplomatic integration, we both have braved these situations. The aggressiveness that China has shown during this time is not a thing which is to be told, as everyone has experienced their practices with naked eyes. There is also an opportunity lies to relate the fragmented area and outshine in the Southeast Asia. The demography that both the nations enjoy is something which one can find almost everything in nature's beauty here, and now is the time to manage these in such a coordinated manner which can make them become self-reliant. And recently, during this launch, our Prime Minister also emphasized a lot on the Atmanirbharta, which is self-reliance. The geographical location of both the countries are favoring them in all these spheres. Tourism can be taken as another aspect for their development. As both the countries share Indian Ocean along with only Maldives, there is a huge scope of maritime progress as well. Areas are many, but I am just pointing out some of the areas in which we still need to do a lot. And there is ample scope which is available. In the sphere of mutual cooperation, I would specifically like to point out the initiatives which the governments are taking to promote harmony among them. That may be the organization of the International Yoga Day, wherein the political leaders of both the countries are promoting this in their own space. Even I had an opportunity to watch the president organizing the International Yoga Day in Sri Lanka, along with around 2,000 people doing yoga on that very day. The settlement of civil war in China and the LTT, both India and Sri Lanka are very much affected by terrorism. Both the nations now enjoy cordial relations on many fronts now, but still the scope is very much open, wherein the organizations such as Binding Bharat, including me, can do a lot. And as Suresh sir and the Ranil sir just said, the torch bearers are always the young generation, and whatever Kanu Priya, Prasanna and everybody is doing, there is a lot of, and it can be done. And well, as the time is limited, and by saying all this, still there is a lot of scope and space left which needs to be filled. And I personally believe that the initiatives taken by Binding Bharat with their enthusiastic and positive approach, the time is not too far when India and Sri Lanka together, I will specifically repeat, the time is not too far when India and Sri Lanka together will play a leading role in the world accord. Finally, I also thank and appreciate my co-panelists from India and Sri Lanka for the valuable insights on the progress of India and Sri Lanka. Hoping to have such conferences in future again. Thank you.
Such a wonderful talk, sir. It's always a pleasure to hear you out. Now, moving forward, I would like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Shakti De Selva from Sri Lanka. Sir.
Thank you. I believe everyone can hear me.
Yes.
So let me begin by acknowledging and appreciating former Ambassador Mrs. Pamela Dean for providing me an opportunity to speak at this forum and for the gracious welcome offered by Binding Bharat. At the outset, let me make clear my views in no way represent the views of the institutions that I'm affiliated with. And I will basically pick off from where Mr. George Cook left off in terms of the political dynamics between India and Sri Lanka's foreign policy in general. So basically, one of the most interesting developments that took place after the general election in Sri Lanka was the duties and functions that were ascribed to the newly appointed Minister of Foreign Relations. As per the extraordinary gazette, the minister has been tasked with a special responsibility to assess existing bilateral agreements and investigate whether any clauses or articles therein may have a detrimental effect on the local economy. Now, this special responsibility is noteworthy owing to the fact that it was not previously assigned to the Minister of Foreign Relations in past regimes. Another interesting development is the government's decision to appoint Mr. Tarak Balasurya, a comparatively young member of parliament, as the State Minister for Regional Cooperation. Now, the State Minister position was not something that was visible in previous regimes, and this outlines the fact that the new regime will be more interested in developing ties with regional countries, India included. The decision to select Mr. Barasuri is also important owing to the fact that his predominant concerns, as evaluated by his speeches in Parliament, are on topics related to economics and finance. As a State Minister for Regional Cooperation, his duties include strong economic and trade ties with Asian nations and strengthening Sri Lanka's bonds with the SAARC and BIMSTEC nations. Now, this is explicitly outlined in the Extraordinary Gazette. Now, another reshuffling of import is the appointment of retired Admiral Professor Jayannath Columbage as the Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Relations, post that tended to be held by career diplomats. Now, the question in terms of Sri Lanka-India relations is, why are these developments salient? What signals has the Gotabaya Rajapaksa regime sent by introducing new portfolios, delegating special responsibilities, and appointing a former admiral to the position of the Secretary of Ministry of Foreign Relations? Firstly, one can assume that there will be a reinvigorated emphasis on strengthening ties with India and other neighboring states. When dealing with foreign powers, we can assume that Sri Lanka's policymakers will be keen to tip the import-export balance in the island's favor and entice foreign direct investments from regional and extra-regional powers. These are all issues which the general populace, and in particularly the youth, feel very strongly about. Now, the creation of the State Minister for Regional Cooperation, I believe, is very important for this dialogue. And it's the specific statement that the minister's responsibilities include that of enhancing ties with BIMSTEC and SAARC states points to a fact which I outlined in an article that was titled Geoeconomics, Regional Orders in South Asia. Now, the article, which I co-authored with a colleague of mine at the University of Colombo, delineated a foreign policy orientation which we defined as concentric circles-based hierarchical approach of establishing friendly external relations. Now, according to this approach, Sri Lanka's principal focus when the island's policymakers engage in foreign policy decisions will be India and the other regional powers in the Asian context. Now, the creation of a State Minister for Regional Cooperation and the newly appointed Foreign Secretary's declaration that Sri Lanka should adopt an Asia-centric approach by applying greater attention to SAARC and ASEAN nations in terms of political and economic ties substantiates this hypothesis that we forwarded in 2019. Now, Sri Lanka must also deal with the negative optics surrounding the Hambantota port and other infrastructure built with Chinese funding. To do so, academics and policymakers alike must push against claims and narratives of debt trap diplomacy, predatory lending, and checkbook diplomacy, all in relation to Sri Lanka's foreign policy. Now, this is important not just in terms of the government taking active measures to challenge arguments or allegations raised in this regard, but it is also significant to note the fact that young Sri Lankan economists and policymakers have pushed against this allegation, but more needs to be done, particularly in relation to this narrative that is brought forward by some media. Now, in terms of Sri Lanka and India's bilateral partnership, Sri Lanka greatly values its relationship with India and has over the years strived to build on this robust partnership by diversifying engagement in the socio-economic field. Sri Lanka's economy has substantially suffered with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in this backdrop, the decision of the Reserve Bank of India to enter into a currency swap agreement with the Central Bank of Sri Lanka is a very important move that needs to be commended, and more bilateral engagements of this nature is important, particularly in terms of the investment dimension and in terms of the trade dimension. Two sectors which India can enhance its engagement with Sri Lanka that needs more further impetus. Sri Lankans, to conclude really, to Sri Lankans in the years ahead, hope to see deeper and mutually beneficial political, security, and socio-economic ties with all its Asian nations, particularly its closest neighbor, India. Now, to attain these objectives, the newly elected government must adopt innovative and efficacious strategies, as well as engage with academia and with the youth in particular as it charts Sri Lanka's foreign policy. Because a policy that is divested from academia, that is divested from engaging with the youth, has extremely negative consequences that has resulted in regimes being overthrown in the past. With that, I'll end my statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. That was a great talk by you. Such a beautiful analysis. We had a very wonderful round of talks by all our esteemed panelists. And what a lovely learning experience it was to hear them all out. While I was listening to them, I did note some points which I feel like re-emphasizing. Respected Karkar sir's memory on radio and cricket were very insightful and profound. George Cook sir's focus on South Asia, role of cricket, maritime focus, and the mentioning of Asian century is something which we all need to ponder on. Simrat ma'am's mention of Shimerica, which was very new to us, prisoners of geography, the angle of language he mentioned, and the post-COVID New World Order. Anurag sir's focus on commerce and economy and trade as well was very insightful. And we all are aware of Ashok sir's established work on Ram Setu as well. Listening Selva sir and talking about the political analysis and his academic knowledge was a very good learning experience. Maisha ma'am's comprehensive coverage of the topic was outstanding. I wanted to tell our participants that respected Karkar sir's contribution in the field of education is immense. Sir has an experience of more than 50 years in the field of education, and he's the senior most here. We all are really, really thankful to you, sir. Your presence really enriched us. Now, we would want to open a session to our participants. They may ask questions. I did get some questions on our social media platforms. Okay, so the first question is from Mr. Vatsal. His question is for George Cook, sir. Vatsal, can we have Vatsal on the screen?
Hello everyone. My name is Vatsal Bora and I'm a resident of Lucknow, Uttar Pradesh. I am currently an engineering student at the University of Waterloo in Canada. And I have got a question from Mr. George Cook. I was hoping to get your insights on how India and Sri Lanka can cooperate to ensure peace in the Indian Ocean region.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. Thank you very much for focusing on that particular area. The Indian Ocean is very significant from a Sri Lankan perspective. Sri Lanka enjoys a large potential of seabed. stretching into many more times the size of the island itself, when you look at the actual area that encompasses the parts that Sri Lanka is responsible for. Now, this is where capacity building, the sharing of technology, the sharing of assistance, joint patrols, undertaking measures in order to carry out navigation activities, study activities within the context of the Indian Ocean. There is an agreement that was signed between India, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives back in 2013. Now, this agreement needs to be emboldened that much more. This agreement needs to be brought on board. We are not seeing sufficient activity taking place in this arena of Indian Ocean monitoring, Indian Ocean surveillance activities, but there's a lot more that can be done on that particular platform. This is because of resources which are very skewed between the two countries, as you would understand. And this is where India has a huge opportunity of working with Sri Lanka, taking Sri Lanka on board in terms of creating a better synergy in the ocean. Very often we hear of vessels that are entering waters in order to carry out various study purposes, research activities, etc. Now, how much of this information is being given to countries sitting in the Indian Ocean? How much of this is being shared with countries in the Indian Ocean? This is where countries of the Indian Ocean have to lay claim to the ocean, have to be a part and parcel of what is happening in our waters. And what better than neighbors getting together and looking at ways and means through which we can better monitor our own waters, ensuring that the Indian Ocean, yes, is a very important connectivity between the East and the West, a very important shipping lines, very important trade connection between, for the world, but there's so much more that we can do collectively from a perspective of working bilaterally between these two countries. And of course, going back to that agreement I mentioned, also including the Maldives, in terms of being aware of our waters and the potential of our waters.
Very well, sir. Such a wonderful question and obviously a wonderful answer by respected sir. We are having a lot many questions coming on our social media platforms. Can we get them filtered? Okay, so we do have it. Our second question is coming from this gentleman named Parikshit. Can we get Parikshit on screen?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Parikshit Singh, by engineer by profession, and I have cleared defense service examination few times. I have question for N.K. Kakkar, sir. Sir, given your experience in the field of education and with youth, how do you think youth can contribute to strength?
Do we have respected sir? Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
I would only say, Mr. Parikshit, just if you have been listening to the various persons, there have been various issues that have been raised, starting from valuing democracy, human rights violation, terror, technology, security development, education, and so on and so forth. And I personally feel that as far as the present is concerned, developing a new normal during COVID is the most important aspect. If the youth are supposed to work in any direction today, I think there is one area which they should concentrate. But then I have mentioned so many other areas where you can just talk about, think about, and try to contribute. And that will really be helping Binding Bharat. So that's something that you need to look into. But remember one thing, whatever area you decide to go for must be thoroughly investigated, must be thoroughly inquired into. The reasons thereof should be adopted, should be known, and then the strategy adopted accordingly. So if that is done, perhaps the success story will be there. But otherwise, normally, if we don't go through all that process, maybe that we are stopped somewhere in between. So please try to look into the totality of the situation, and whatever topic you decide, collect relevant information, analyze it, and then decide as to what is to be done. Now, that is what exactly needs to be done for any problem that you may come across. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. So our next question is from Mr. Jaskaran. Can we have Mr. Jaskaran on the screen? Yes, Jaskaran.
So my question is for Ms.
Jaskaran, I would request
Kanupriya.
you to speak a little bit more loudly with your earphones next to your mouth, right? Thank you.
So my question is for Mrs. Kanupriya, as she is the founder of Binding Bharat. I would like to know, what do you look forward to do in the future? As in, what we can all expect from Binding Bharat? Thank you.
Kanupriya, over to you.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jaskaran, for your question. So Binding Bharat is, a tool for us. It's the tool through which we become more familiar with the realities of young people in our own regions and elsewhere. And, we can express ourselves freely without expectations, hopes, and concerns. So being a part of Binding Bharat, what and bring about a change in the society which which we wish to see. And Binding Bharat is just based on a single premise that young people have the potential and willingness to bring about a momentous change. Therefore, they must be provided with opportunities to play a significant role for creating better lives for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanupriya. Wonderful explanation. So we'll be taking a few more questions, probably 3 or 4 more. Our next question is from this gentleman named Kapil. Kapil, can we have Kapil on the screen? Very good question, I think. Kapil, kindly turn on your audio. Yes, Kapil.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, hi, my name is Kapil Joshi. I'm a operations and management professional which have been working in startup and audit industry for past 7 years. I'm currently pursuing my master's from Narsee Monjee in Mumbai. I have a very relevant question to the times. There was a very interesting anecdote that I came through that they were talking something about the South China Sea and there was a news headline which said like, who cares? So while people were wondering that it's a question that who cares, it was Mr. Who from China who actually cared for that. So my question in that context is to Simrit ma'am, that what do you feel are the implications of South China Sea conflict on our region for India and Sri Lanka primarily right now? Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, like I mentioned in my talk, China has been a very, very aggressive entity in the Asian neighborhood. And count of the fact that China is also a country that is not satisfied with what it already has within its borders, which are very, very large, just by the way. So the other problem with China is that, well, it is a respected neighbor for us otherwise also, but it does not really respect the sovereignty of other countries. So taking all these things into view, we have to be wary of maybe South China Sea is not really in our immediate backyard today, but the actions of the country in the South China Sea are likely to be repeated in other places, mostly in the Indian Ocean, and it has been trying to do so. In the very recent past, it has tried to make ingresses into the area of the Indian Ocean, which is something of great concern for both India and Sri Lanka, and as it rightly should be. And a lot of the Indo-Pacific conflict and Indo-Pacific concerns that we have right now also have to do with that, and the very, very aggressive manner in which China is pursuing its economic as well as territorial interests. So it is a matter of concern for us, certainly, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So our next question is by this lady named Preeti. Can we have Preeti on the screen?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. Myself, Preeti Sharma. I'm pursuing law from Campus Law Center. I want to ask question from Anurag, sir. That is, why SARC isn't realizing its true potential like ASEAN?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Preeti, for the question. Basically, SARC and ASEAN, I would just brief you about both of them. The motivation for forming any regional bodies is very simple. Neighbors are better off if they are friendly and not fractious. Regional cooperation is supposed to create the necessary atmosphere for converting foes into friends. The rationale for membership in a regional organization was that it was likely to provide better protection against any predatory move that might be contemplated by the regional heavyweights. Both ASEAN and the SARC are essentially intergovernmental arrangements, and this complicates their ability to address and manage intra-regional conflicts. If we look into this with the current perspective, the area of operation of SARC is much wider, and probably it's including 8 member nations and with 9 observers, while ASEAN has 10 members and 2 observer states only, and neither India or Sri Lanka is in ASEAN. So just to give a very brief answer in a one-liner, in the case of ASEAN, an informal approach without any binding legal obligations has been the preferred mode of operation. That's why. And SARC needs to build something on these fronts. Like we have seen in past, the GATT, General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs, was abolished and WTO was established in 1995. Something needs to be done with SARC, and hopefully down the line in future, probably in a year or two, we'll be seeing something good for SARC also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Our next question. Okay, we have more and more girls coming in. It's wonderful. By the lady named Lubna. Can we have Lubna on the screen?
Good evening, everyone. My question is from Mr. Shakti, and I would like to ask you that, sir, do you think that the Raj Prakasha government will be able to deal with India's concern regarding its proximity with China?
Right. Thank you very much, Lubna, for your question. So regarding Sri Lanka's relationship with China, that has raised a couple of eyebrows, particularly after the 2005 period. Now, the issue here to take into consideration is what is the nature of the relationship between Sri Lanka and China? The nature of the relationship is particularly tied to economics in terms of the foreign direct investments that came during that period of time and the level of infrastructure that was built through Chinese funding. Now, the security concerns is probably the most talked about issue. So let me sort of address that in the first place. Once the Hambantota port was created, there was a security narrative that was put forward by certain media outlets that Sri Lanka's security was compromised, its sovereignty was compromised, owing to the fact that in 2017, the Hambantota port was provided through a 99-year lease to a Chinese company. The argument was that because of this, Sri Lanka has let go of sovereignty, and because of that, Sri Lanka would become, over time, a base of China. Now, the argument has significant flaws because of several reasons. Firstly, the agreement is a commercial agreement. Secondly, the naval forces in the southern region were moved to the Hambantota port, right? The former prime minister who came for this discussion himself stated that this action would be taken by his government. So there was an iteration of that. Also, the Chinese government has stated that they have no explicit intentions of developing Hambantota port as a naval base. Now, the issue here is the Hambantota port is in a very strategic location, and India has security concerns with regard to ports that are provided to external parties in its neighborhood. When Sri Lanka engages with relations either with extra-regional powers or regional powers, it needs to take into consideration the security dynamics that India wants in its neighborhood. That is not to say that Sri Lanka must always do what India does. Sri Lanka has agency in its own self, but Sri Lanka must be mindful of the security implications that might come not just to Sri Lanka, but to India. So in this case, of course, there was a substantial narrative against Sri Lanka that Sri Lanka was providing things away. But once you look into it, once you dig deep into the relationship, in terms of debt, Sri Lanka's debt to China is around 10 to 15%. That's substantially lower than Sri Lanka's debt to financial lenders abroad, right? In terms of the infrastructure, there's a lot of infrastructure, but in terms of the returns, there's not a lot of returns, right? So because of that, that is one reason why the former prime minister who spoke on this platform provided the Hammat report in terms of a so-called debt to equity. Of course, it's not necessarily debt to equity, but provided it on a 99-year lease to the Chinese company. Because they are not obtaining returns, now Sri Lanka's hope is to develop economically through infrastructure. So its hope was to obtain Chinese funding. But in the event that Chinese funding is not providing returns, Sri Lanka is also open to Indian funding. And of course, we are hopeful that in the future, India will contribute even to a large extent in terms of foreign direct investment to spur development in Sri Lanka, so that the bilateral partnership can develop in that sector as well.
Thank you very much, sir. Wonderful explanation. So we'll be closing our Q&A session with the last question. So the question is coming from a gentleman named Kuldeep. Can we have Kuldeep on the screen?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paramveer Singh. I'm a practicing advocate.
Right. I'm sorry. It's Paramveer. It's Paramveer. I read the first name and the second question. Sorry.
Never mind.
Please go ahead.
My name is Paramveer Singh. I'm a resident of Chandigarh, and I'm basically practicing law at Punjab and Haryana High Court. My question is basically for Mahisha ma'am. As she talked about fake news, so in the era of, especially in the era of social media, my question would be that India and Sri Lanka, since they are socially diverse countries, we have people with different faiths and different social cultures. So what can both our countries learn from each other to establish social harmony?
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Thank you for that question. What I understand is that because of the cultures, the similarity in the cultures, the similarity in languages, there's so much that we can learn from fake news because the context, the narratives of the fake news in terms of whether it's be it in the political sphere or in the religious sphere, because we're so close, there's a lot of rich exchange of information, because the kind of archiving of false news that we have done is a database that we can share with each other. And because of the like I already pointed out, Tamil is a really widely spoken language in Tamil Nadu, and we also have lots of Tamil speaking people living in Sri Lanka. So one of the things that we can do is that the false news, the narratives, the languages, the context, all of that, we have seen that there is so much of similarity. And on a platform like Facebook, you can't distinguish, when Tamil language is used, you can't sort of distinguish between what is Sri Lankan and what is Indian. It's sort of kind of combines together. So we, in our archives also, we have seen a lot of false news that is more relevant to India. So I feel like if we come together in such initiatives, there's so much that we can learn from each other. Also because there's attacks against religions, which is common between the two countries. So I feel like political and religious exchanges could be very rich if we come together.
Wonderful, ma'am. Thank you so much. Now, before we move towards the conclusion, can we get the questions? No more questions. Before we conclude, on the death anniversary of Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, we would like to pay our homage from the team of Binding Bharat and respects to him. Now, we should be moving towards the ending of the session. I would like to thank all our dignitaries for taking out their precious time for us. It really means a lot to us. I would also thank our participants on the Zoom session as well as our viewers. Okay. Thank you all for this insightful and thought-provoking discussion. I would like to add a final remark in view of conclusion. Political theorists like Benedict Anderson found the imagination of communities limited to the boundaries of a nation. For the past few months of isolation and uneven international cooperation has ignited in us the dream of breaking down barriers and binding Bharat to the world. What can't we achieve if we seek meaning, not in limits, but beyond them? If we dream of warmth and harmony, not within nations, but across them? What if we imagine a community, and that community constituted the globe? It is a bold dream, and we could be faulted with the idealism characteristic of youth, for undaunted by its magnitude. Today, we have begun on a journey. We should unfree ourselves from the shackles of regressive mindsets and get beyond the boundaries of race, religion, color, sex, and place of birth. Healthy associations are a good thing and make us rooted. But when they take the form of discrimination and sense of superiority, then, my friend, we are definitely doomed. Coexistence is the way forward. Our gratitude is boundless for our friends from the beautiful land of Sri Lanka. It need not to be reiterated at the end of this spectacular session that our relationship backs centuries. But we are confident in saying that our faith in each other will go forward several more. Thank you all for gracing this evening with your presence and for standing with us as we set out to manifest our dream. I would like to end the session with a shade by Nusrat Mehdi Saab. Fazaye amano ama ki sada rakhe qaim. Fazaye amano ama ki sada rakhe qaim. Suno, ye farz tumhara bhi hai aur hamara bhi. Thank you everyone. Very warm regards and have a pleasant day.